Hello and welcome back to the AI in Business podcast brought to you by Raw Media. I'm Chris and joining me again is my co-host Nick Hodder. Nick, welcome back.
Hi Chris, great to be here.
And for anyone joining us for the first time, this is the podcast where we try to cut through the noise around AI in business. Not the sci-fi version, although Nick did touch on data centers in space last week. And it's not the LinkedIn guru version, it's the practical version. What's changing, what's overhyped, what businesses should actually care about, and where AI is quietly making work better, weirder, faster, riskier, or occasionally all four at once. Nick, before we get into the news, anything that's been on your mind this week?
There was a new model released by Anthropic, Claude Sonnet 5. So I've also been playing with that. Fable 5 is now available to everyone again, but generally there's been a lot going on, so I think we'll cover most of it in this episode. But yeah, it's been a really interesting week, let's say that.
It has. There's been plenty to kind of choose from in terms of the output on news, media, and everything. So we'll jump straight into it. And I think one of the recurring stories that we keep seeing, which is a bit more kind of big picture thinking, is around the AI boom. And this week, the Bank for International Settlements, which is effectively the central bank for central banks, has warned again that the AI boom could become a financial risk. So that's nothing new, and it's no concern around AI being useless, but it's more around the level of investment and valuation and market excitement around AI. So I think we moved from will AI change business to has the market priced in more AI transformation that businesses can actually deliver? And I think that's just becoming a little bit more apparent week on week. And what's your take on that?
I think this is a Hemingway quote. How did you go bankrupt, Bill asked. 2 ways, Mike said, gradually and then suddenly. So I think we've got to bear in mind that when the internet arrived, everyone was using Alta Vista and Lycos, and probably everyone thought those would be the big companies to invest in to get a stake in the internet revolution. And it turned out that actually it was a bunch of other companies that ended up winning out. So it's really hard for us to predict those things. I think if you're implementing this stuff, my advice is probably to plan and rigorously prepare for the worst, and also plan and rigorously prepare for the best, because hope is not a strategy. Often the technology isn't the thing that delays things. Technology often is very good, but the friction comes from internal processes and culture. So I think it'll take a long time for internal processes and culture to catch up with technology, especially in legacy organizations.
Definitely. And I think the business takeaway here probably would be it's no longer enough to say we're investing in AI. It's the kind of the harder question is what we're getting back. And I think the knock-on effect of that is boardroom decision-making, technology budgets, going back to the investor confidence and vendor pricing as well, because that's likely to change, and obviously then the pressure on AI teams to prove the value. I think that leads nicely on to the next story about Microsoft being sued over the quiet failure of Office AI's Copilot. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
I think this will be really familiar to a lot of our audience. I mean, a vast amount of organizations are using Microsoft Office 365 and Dynamics 365, and in that kind of Microsoft ecosystem, you'll have exposure to Copilot. There are free versions of Copilot that your organization can use, and there are more expensive versions. I think Microsoft was very keen for people to adopt the kind of more premium Copilots. But those licenses were very expensive, and I think there was a general feeling that the cost of those licenses weren't really meeting the expectations of many users. The upshot is that Microsoft are currently facing a class action securities lawsuit from their own shareholders, who allege that the company has kind of overshot the mark on AI washing Copilot, if you will. I think those are strong words, but there'll be varying levels of concern or lack of concern from our audience. But I felt like we were promised that Copilot would be a bit more effortless. Essentially, I think they kind of alluded to this idea that you could do, say, a lot more with Microsoft Excel than it ended up doing. I'd have liked it if Copilot could have done my Q3 earnings report while I went off for a long lunch, but that didn't happen. And it's not to say that I don't find Copilot useful. I think it's good at making my email replies sound a little bit less passive-aggressive, which it helps other people as well as me, I suspect. But I hear people when they say they don't really feel like the maths added up in terms of that value for money from their Copilot licenses.
Yeah, well, I think the danger is that companies are buying AI tools because they feel like they should, that the competitors are doing them, the whole market's doing it. So they're doing it like they feel they should, but they've not really worked out where the value comes from. It's going back to your earlier point around that people element to it all.
The vibe I got from my peers was that the question was from the board quite often, and it was, what are we doing with AI? And this is a thing that you can do with AI. So, I mean, it's a little bit more of a box-ticking exercise, but I fully understand why people would have signed up for it. The other thing is there's a new Microsoft AI, they're calling Microsoft AI, or MI, which was launched relatively recently, build. So Copilot was powered by other models. For a time it was powered by OpenAI models and then Anthropic models. But in the future it will now be powered by Microsoft's own models, recently announced at Build, as I said. And on the face of it, they look pretty good. So whether that results in, because that model will be trained on Microsoft stacks, a model that's more deeply aligned and more optimized with Microsoft ecosystems, we'll have to see. I do think Copilot will end up being better aligned with Microsoft use cases, but we need to wait a little longer to see how that plays out and whether Copilot eventually lives up to its promise. I think we'll want a great useful AI embedded into Microsoft products, so I'm willing them to succeed.
And then there was an Anthropic report that came out this week, which was really interesting, around workers thinking that AI will sack everyone else first, which made for really interesting reading.
So the report basically says that when they interviewed workers, it revealed that only 10% of professionals think they'll lose their job to AI, but over a third believe that their junior colleagues are going to be absolute toast.
It's really interesting, this one, because I think it reminds me of when people are saying, and we talked about this in the last episode, AI won't replace humans, but humans using AI will replace humans not using AI, which sounds clever until you realize nobody knows which group they're in yet. The business angle on this is going to be a huge issue for workforce planning. A lot of the kind of, the junior work is repetitive, structured, document heavy, which makes it, exposed to AI. But the junior element of work is, also how people learn and climb. And if organizations are automating away the early career tasks, they're going to create potentially a future talent problem. So you can't have senior analysts, consultants, marketers, lawyers, whoever, if nobody's getting a chance to be junior first. So the question is not, can AI do the junior work? It's what happens to the career ladder if it does.
Oh, I'm a senior manager with a calendar full of alignment meetings, and I'm a strategic visionary that no automation can replicate. And then there's Dave, the 22-year-old graduate who does the actual work, and they're going, oh, let's automate him immediately. But it's a bit of a roll of the dice, isn't it? The only way you can cut off the bottom without creating further damage is by assuming that AI will also take the middle, which means that you won't have a job either. And so there are two possibilities. Basically, A, 90% of the people will be out of a job, but the good news is that there's no human skills vacuum because human skills are no longer required. Or B, you only manage to automate the bottom through AI and you still haven't figured out how to AI the middle, but the middle just retired, so you've created a catastrophic skills vacuum through your dumb choices. So it's like banning people from driving a car and then expecting them to be a Formula 1 driver the second they turn 30. It's probably not viable because they have never seen a steering wheel before.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Now on to the EU AI Act delay. And this is quite a big one. Not sure if everyone will have seen this, but I think the knock-on effect of this will be, substantial. I'll let you kind of explain what's kind of going on with the European Parliament on this one.
Yeah, so I think there was some concern about that EU AI Act, mainly concerns about how it might stifle innovation and drive business away from the EU market. But there are protections in there as well, so a lot of businesses see the merit of it in some cases. But it was passed. Those on the technology side thought, well, there looks like there's still a lot of work to do there. And then apparently the European Parliament have also discovered that as well. So there's a pretty massive 16-month delay for key enforcement aspects of the Act, pushing obligations to high-risk systems back to late 2027, because they basically haven't figured out a way to write the technical standards yet. The words they used were the technical standards are under development. So is this, Chris, is this the equivalent of saying my dog ate my homework if your homework is a 400-page infrastructure framework?
Pretty much. I mean, this feels like the EU are admitting that regulating AI is easier to announce than it is to actually implement.
Yeah, so I saw this coming. I think a lot of people would have seen it coming too, but it just means there was a lot of wasted time and meetings potentially, and I'm still not convinced the 16-month delay will be it. There's probably more to come.
Yeah, well, I mean, the delay on the surface may be sensible given, everything's not prepared. But it does create, that slightly awkward gap of, AI adoption is moving quickly and enforcement is moving incredibly slowly. So businesses shouldn't necessarily hear the delay and think, great, we can ignore this for another year. And then did you see this story about Workday warning about lawless AI agents? And obviously we talked about AI agents a little bit last week, and I'm sure over the series we'll be continuing to talk about them more. But basically Workday has been talking about the risk of so-called lawless AI agents, which is basically AI agents operating inside businesses without proper visibility, governance, or indeed accountability. And I think this is a really interesting one because we're starting to talk about AI agents almost like employees, digital employees, where they're completing tasks, accessing systems, triggering workflows. Kind of brings in the big question of who manages them.
Yeah, so often these stories are they're quite funny when it's not you, and I imagine they're not very funny at all when it is you. I think whether it's handled by enterprise orchestration frameworks or agent platforms, you need clear responsibilities to safeguard. When you're implementing these systems, that rigor is really important, and we keep hearing these stories, so I'm not sure if it's happening. I think we're also on this journey from kind of vibe coding to agentic coding, and actually we're getting to the stage where now it's perfectly viable to code 90% of a production-ready code base using agentic AI in the right way. There are lots of people playing with OpenClaw and things, but when you do this properly with, say, Google Anti-Gravity or Claude Code, they are pretty good at prompting users to manage risks. For all these tools, you need to set up your environments and your agents with really, really clear guardrails. It means being very clear what folders they have access to, what files they have access to, what the permissions are on any given files, and sandboxing, etc. If you rush into that or don't bother with it, then it's potentially disastrous. In some ways, it's completely changing the roles and responsibilities of software engineers and developers. Almost all of this work is now front-loaded in setting up these environments and guardrails to ensure you're creating a safe environment for agentic coding. And if you don't do that, then this is the kind of stuff that happens. I think there's a lot of room, Chris, for us to discuss this in future episodes in terms of that journey from vibe coding and prototyping into production-ready agentic coding and enterprise agentic platforms. I think there's probably a massive part of the future there that we need to talk about, but it does come with a huge amount of risk. I noticed, by the way, that at Microsoft Build, they announced OpenClaw now runs natively on Windows, and it's the framework for powering something called Microsoft Scout. They're actively encouraging people to use OpenClaw in their Microsoft environment. I'm not sure whether A, I would have done that if I were them, or B, whether it's a good idea to take them up on their offer. But if anyone's got any thoughts on that, feel free to reach out.
Going to move on now to some news around AI productivity suite updates. There's been quite a lot happening over the last kind of week or so on some changes on the kind of the everyday office side of AI, and probably what a lot of our listeners are using on a day-to-day basis. So, across Outlook, Teams, Slack, Google Drive. Microsoft Copilot have just added Anthropic's Claude into Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat. I think that's interesting because it suggests that the workplace AI assistant may not be one single model. It may become a place where users can access different models for different tasks. ChatGPT Business increased the business-focused memory controls. This means the more context AI remembers, the more obviously useful it becomes. But the more it remembers, the more businesses need to think about boundaries, privacy, relevance, and control, of course. And then you'd mentioned at the start of the podcast something about the Claude update. Do you want to just talk a little bit more about that one?
Yeah, so Anthropic have re-released Fable 5 and released Sonnet 5. Fable or Mythos are very powerful models and often actually kind of overkill, or at least have poor cost value propositions for most use cases. They're brilliant for some others. There's Opus, which I think primarily the use case is really for coding, and then there's Sonnet, which a lot of Claude users they're big fans of Sonnet. Sonnet is the kind of general purpose model, really good for writing, anything involving drafting text and things. Tends to be very good at tone of voice. If you want to adopt a specific tone of voice, then it's pretty good. I think we were on Sonnet 4.6, so Sonnet 5 is the new version. Supposedly the benchmarks are better, almost as good as Opus, but it seems quite expensive. The problem is, actually, in a lot of early testing, it's just as expensive as Opus, which would mean that you might actually be better off using Opus for a lot of tasks. There are some thoughts that later Sonnet versions, probably 5.1, 5.2, etc., might build on that and likely to represent better value. But right now, it's not great value. So a lot of people are suggesting maybe stick with 4.6 for the time being. It's also temporarily cheaper, 5, about a third cheaper, but only for the next month. Then it's going back up to full price. It's okay. It's probably going to get better. It might be more fun to play around with Fable 5 if you've got some spare time. To be fair, in terms of 4.6, I think it's got like the tone of voice and things, but I actually prefer Gemini models for a lot of things at the moment. But then I prefer OpenAI models for other things. So they're all really close in some ways. Often it depends on what ecosystem you're bought into. There was a bit of kind of model flipping sometimes happening where people were using ChatGPT and then moving over to Gemini, then moving over to Claude. I think it's all pretty close now, close enough to basically say, I'll stick with the model I'm subscribed to, and that I'm going to assume that within the next few weeks or months there'll be some iterative update that makes that one the new best model, because that's what's happening at the moment.
Nice. And that wasn't a sponsorship plug either. We're unfortunately not covered on that.
I think it's interesting from, if you think about Google and Microsoft, not picking sides, but Google have got a great advantage in terms of embedding models into consumer users. Primarily, they've got business-to-business product in Google Workspace and Cloud, so they've got that business-to-business link as well. In Google Cloud, you can use any model, so you can use Claude if you want to, you can use OpenAI models, you can use other third-party models within that ecosystem. So Google have got an advantage there, but Microsoft have obviously got an advantage in terms of there are so many B2B Microsoft customers, so many people in that ecosystem, that if they can get Copilot to perform up to the standards that they've suggested in the past, there's no reason to believe they can't, I don't think. Then there's a really good opportunity there for Microsoft as well. I can't see the vast amount of Microsoft customers moving over to Google or vice versa on the B2B side. I think there might be some frustrations for users of both of these systems from time to time, but people will generally stick to those places. It's hard to migrate business environments. So I think there are strengths and weaknesses, there are advantages and disadvantages, they have from an enterprise perspective, but ultimately it is generally, I mean, we like to moan on podcasts like this, but generally it's getting better and better all the time.
This week's Bad Robot is going to Cursor, the AI coding company whose own AI support bot managed to invent a company policy. Did you see this one, Nick?
Well, I was mainly amused because this is obviously the organisation that SpaceX / Elon Musk, I mean, I'm not sure how all that works really anymore, but essentially they're requiring this company so Elon can ensure he can compete with the best of the best. And then something like this happens. So, it's quite an Elon Musk thing to happen, and I think it feels preventable.
So to give it some context, Cursor is an AI-powered coding tool, and a user had contacted support after being kicked out while trying to use Cursor across multiple devices. The support response said this was because of a new policy limiting each subscription to one device, which of course sounds annoying, but at least clear. Apart from the one small issue was that new policy did not exist. The bot had made it up, which left Cursor later having to clarify that it had not quietly changed its subscription rules and that the incorrect response had come from its AI support system. So I think this, ties to hallucinations. It's a classic hallucination problem. The AI product produced something that sounded plausible and it sounded like a real policy. And it had, obviously, when it delivered that, it had the tone of a customer support answer, but it simply wasn't true.
Something like this comes back to not just guardrails, but you need to think really deeply as a human. You can't outsource a lot of this stuff. You can't outsource the human bit to AI. You need to think deeply about your customer experience. And that's not to say you can't use agentic AI or RAG models. But then, you really need to know that your system is plugged into all the right data. Your RAG is generated from all the right data, and that data is up to date. If there's a policy update that's made in a database, that is vectorized and made available to the model. If you don't do all of that, then you're potentially creating more problems than you're solving, or at least solving a bunch of small problems, but you're creating some massive ones, and also some reputational risk potentially in this instance. So I think there's a lot to consider, and people just need to know that there's a lot to consider, rather than thinking, if I use AI, that's less to consider. It isn't right now, there's more. Hopefully people can learn from this kind of thing, but in my experience, actually, when it's done right, it these kinds of things don't tend to hallucinate so much, if the safeguards are in place.
Big time. I mean, if a chatbot is answering customers, it should probably come from, approved knowledge sources only.
I think my view, just say you're an organization with 5,000 employees and you realize that AI can replace 4,000 of the jobs. You shouldn't make anyone redundant. You should put all 4,000 people in the call center. Because I think if we automate everything, it would be an amazing opportunity. Imagine if you phoned up your bank or your mobile phone company and there was one ring and then a human immediately picked up and they're on the phone saying, how can I actually help you today?
Right, in this part of the show, Nick, I'm going to give you 5 AI tools or categories, and you're going to have to rank them blind. So you don't know what's coming next. So if you put something at number 1 too early, that's your problem. And frankly, that's the kind of jeopardy this podcast was built for.
Wow. Okay.
So in today's episode, I want you to rank these AI use cases, and I want you to rank them based on biggest actual productivity gain. So clear on the instructions? You know what you do?
Yes, I think so.
Creating presentations. So number 1 would be the biggest, actual productivity gain. Number 5 would be the lowest.
This is a hard one because it's getting a lot better, I think. One of the biggest problems was that you couldn't actually create a presentation a lot of the time. It didn't really work very well. Now you can in many cases, but it never really turns out the things that I'm looking for. I think I can see how it might work for other people because I think I'm looking for something else from presentations that AI doesn't really understand. I'm not sure the humans understand either. So maybe I'll go 3.
Next one is fixing spreadsheets.
Okay, again, this used to be a hard one, but it's also, I think, especially for those of us who are sort of mediocre at Excel, but are forced to use Excel in some ways, it's the dream. I mentioned earlier that if my AI could do my Q3 reporting whilst I had a long lunch, that would be amazing. It's getting better now, but it's not there yet. I'm going to say 2.
Analyzing documents.
Okay, for what purpose? This is quite broad, analysing documents. I do think it's potentially great. There are applications like Notebook LM, which are phenomenal. Right, so you've got like a raft of documents, 50 documents. Maybe you've got the board meeting minutes for the last 5 years, and you've been asked by the chairman of the board to like summarise them or something. That sounds like a kind of god-awful thing that some poor administrator will have to deal with. Something like Notebook LM is incredible. I love research uses of LLMs. I think they're some of the most powerful. So, I'm going to go with 1.
Nice. Next one is drafting emails.
Hold on, have I filled 1, 2, and 3?
Yes, you have.
I think it's fair to put this one in 4, and the main reason is it can do it, but I end up completely rewriting it every time, and I think that comes down to there's a lot of maybe you don't care about your emails. Maybe I care about my emails more than other people, but there's some real nuance in the way I like to communicate with people, the specific person or specific situation. So I think there are lots of human angles to email communication. Maybe am I overthinking it? I might be overthinking it.
No, I'm with you on that one. I think it's so obvious when you receive an email that it's not been written by the sender.
Yeah.
And regardless of kind of context of the email, it really puts you off because you automatically think in your head that person can't be bothered to either communicate properly with me or respond properly to me. And I think there's always that idea around that someone's not put in the time to communicate properly with you. So
I think generally there's not enough shame in the world right now. So people should feel ashamed when they get called out on their AI email. That's my view. It's a personal thing, but that's my view.
Yeah, got you. And then the final one is summarizing meetings.
Oh, okay, damn, because that's quite good.
I mean, I stung you with that one.
Okay, it's not a 5, but now it is apparently a 5. This is actually very good, though. I just think that the error rate tends to be very low on these now. I've built systems that transcribe audio relatively recently, and so the AI stuff is well below the human error rate. It's not just transcription, it's diarization, which is understanding who's speaking. It can pick up names and start automatically labeling people through the diarization because it now knows their name. We've had automatic transcription for a long time, at least a decade. And what it used to do is transcribe word by word, but now AI transcription understands context, so it can change its interpretation based on the context, thus helping it figure out what the words might actually mean, and therefore getting a much lower error rate. I think it's actually really powerful, which is why, Chris, I'm putting it at number 5, the worst possible one.
Can't believe you did that. Absolute criminal activity there. So that brings us to the end of episode 2. Today we've covered quite a bit. Warning again that the AI boom could become a financial risk. Workday's argument that businesses need to properly manage AI agents, and then some updates around Copilot, ChatGPT, and of course Nick badly rating some use cases there. The questions are becoming less about kind of what AI can do, more about how businesses control it. I think that's really obvious in the conversation today as well, and as we kind of move forward through these podcasts. So hopefully that's been useful. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, follow the show, leave us a review, and share it with someone who is currently pretending they fully understand AI agents. Nice. And Nick, thank you as always. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. I'm just going to keep waving like this.